Okay, and we are live. Welcome to another episode 5, where we're going to be reacting to various things on Twitter and beyond. I'm Daniel Dumbrill, and we have Carl Zha with us. Carl, how are you doing today?
How are you, Daniel?
I'm good. All good. Hold on a second. There we go. Almost forgot this.
Yeah, you can't. We can't start without the shirt, guys.
Oh yeah.
This is a multipolarity shirt podcast.
Yes, it is. This is my last new one I've got in the tank. Now I'm going to start, especially some travelers in.
Yeah, you gotta order on those Pinduoduo.
Yeah. They're really cheap. They're like 27 renminbi, 35 renminbi you can get them for. It's amazing.
Wow.
It's so good.
And they deliver everywhere, so you can't even get it on the road if you stay in one place more than a day.
That is true. With the exception of Xinjiang. Xinjiang usually takes a much longer time. And it's just
like a couple
it's just
days,
so
like
far
2,
away.
3 days. Yeah.
So we're gonna be trying to do this show from the road too. I've got some equipment, and I'm gonna be bringing that along with us. We're probably gonna skip next week's show because that'll be right when I'm on the road. But after that, it should be good. Now for this week, we have a bunch of stuff loaded up, but because I've been preparing a lot for my trip, I didn't contribute too much to what's in here. So most of it's gonna be your stuff, and then we kind of you can lead it, and I'll react to it together, and I'll just kind of facilitate this. So welcome everybody. I see there's a few people already showing up here. Let's just jump right into this. Okay, actually, we will start with one that's mine, and that is, I just want to address this. I get this quite a lot. It says, you're supposed to be calling it the CPC, not the CCP. I'm aware of that, but I just I feel like, and I'll get your opinion on this after, Carl, but I feel like the priority for me is just getting people to understand the actual real China. And the people I want to speak to are people who are using this language. They can figure that out on their own later. It's not really a big deal to me. But I can understand for somebody who wants people to start using the correct terminology, that may annoy them. But I feel like I feel like I can reach more middle ground people too if I'm using their language. If they're like, oh, you're using that very strictly, it's supposed to be CPC. Oh, you can't call it, you're like the other guys. You can't call it Tibet anymore. You have to call it Xinjiang. It's like just that's not my priority. I can understand for somebody who is a stickler for details and they really want you to use the correct terminology, but again, just not my priority. What's your thoughts on that, Carl?
Well. Yeah, actually, it doesn't really matter if it's in Chinese, because Chinese is just 中国共产党, right? How you translate it into English, is there as Communist Party, the Chinese Communist Party, or Communist Party of China? Like the official, I guess the official translation by the government is now the Communist Party of China, but they also have used before Chinese Communist Party. I think it's a matter of kind of the evolution of language, because the CCP is being used overwhelmingly by people who like talk bad about China, and in some people's view that becomes kind of a derogatory term. But I don't mind reclaiming language. I don't mind reclaiming words, right? So I think what you're doing correct. A lot of what we're doing is we're deconstructing all the China narrative by the people who use that language, CCP. So I'm not a stickler of words anyway. So
yeah, I appreciate the point being made. But I just wanted to kind of, give some context behind why I don't necessarily care as much, but also in some ways prefer using the language of the people who,
it's not like we're dropping the N-word bomb here.
We're trying,
This is, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we're trying to reach those people, but yeah. All right, so we'll jump into a couple of economic tweets that you have highlighted for discussion here. Let's go. Let's let you take it away.
Okay, so right now, this is an article from The Atlantic by Michael Schumann. By the way, Michael Schumann is a guy who wrote a tweet, an infamous tweet, who said Xi Jinping should really watch Hamilton, the play,
Oh, yeah.
in order to understand American democracy. And maybe if he actually watched Hamilton, he will actually understand how to interact with a democratic government that allow him to win friends rather than alienate them. I mean, like, that's such a ridiculous tweet. But anyway, so it's not surprising that he's giving this like brain dead take. And the idea of this article is that the overcapacity of the Chinese economy is bad for everybody. It's bad for the people in the West, bad for the consumers who somehow now have to purchase those cheap, affordable goods, and it's bad for the Chinese worker. I mean, this is just gaslighting now. Like it's like I saw the QTs, the quoted tweets, and the comments. It's overwhelmingly people are just making fun of him because this is. I mean, like, how do you come up with this, right? Like this guy says, this guy says it's fascinating watching U.S. elite and policymakers try to navigate the following contradiction. China's AI field productivity boom is taking everyone down. Number one. Number two, the coming U.S. AI field productivity boom that is driving the U.S. stock boom won't hurt the U.S. employment at all. Right, so a lot of this. By the way, a lot of this China bad narrative, including talking shit about Chinese AI, actually is funded by U.S. AI firms, OpenAI, who are paying people to say bad stuff about Chinese AI. At the same time, they want you to believe that. Somehow the American AI, once it's cheap, super intelligent, it's going to be great for everybody, great for American workers, which is complete bullshit because the whole premise of American AI is based on the premise they're going to replace millions of white-collar jobs. And Warwick has a good take. He says these clowns hate abundance as it denies capital and its political elite with the capacity to extract further rent. And this is the difference between the Chinese model and an American model, by the way, because American model, especially the in the latest AI bubble, the idea is we will innovate in order to build a monopoly, and then we can collect rent. That's a whole model of open AI. They plan to embed AI into everything, but eventually they'll just get a charge rent on top of all economic activity. What Chinese doing is they're using AI in everyday applications that makes things, they're making manufacturing cheaper, therefore the manufactured goods more affordable, and they're handing out open source AI in order for the global South AI developers to be able to access and develop their own product. Which is not OpenAI is doing, because like OpenAI, they're going to charge their arm and a leg, and Anthropics also.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, they said that they want to collect the data, human data that was created by other people, and then resell it to us like a utility, like reselling intelligence like electricity. And it's interesting, the going back to the first tweet, this, China played the game on the international stage according to Western rules. And Western rules before were let the best man win, let the most innovative product, let the product that consumers want to choose win. But as soon as China starts winning at that game, then all of a sudden it's a problem that China's playing the game exactly like how they invented it. And then with AI, when you talk about AI and what it's going to do in the West, it's always about, it's going to increase our productivity so much. And then when China is supposedly using it the same way they are, which they're not, then all of a sudden it's a disaster, saying this is going to affect everybody. And this is like, they want to get the best use out of, all of this stuff. But in actuality, the Chinese government has started to come out with rules, for example, saying that you cannot use AI to replace workers. You can't. That's against the rules here. Obviously, that's going to be really hard to control because it's like with AI, then maybe it will stunt new job creation. They're not necessarily letting existing employees go. But the point is even with those challenges, which are challenges all around the world, they're actively thinking about what can we do to protect the worker, where it's the completely opposite philosophy in the West, but they're treating China like the villain by first pretending that China's doing exactly what they're doing, which is an indictment of what they are doing, even if it was true. And, actually it is an indictment of what they're doing, but that's not actually what's happening on the ground.
Every accusation is a confession.
You know what they say? Yeah.
always projection.
Economic related also. Here we go. You take it away.
Yeah, I think this might be the same article or related article.
Oh, right.
This is again from the Atlantic. Xi Jinping's running of China as a government-subsidized, export-driven manufacturing juggernaut. It's not just bad for the whole industry around the world. It's also distorting China's economy and alienating trading partners. And this person, he has actually a screenshot of what actually they wrote in detail. Chinese manufacturer would be competitive without Xi's help. He provides massive aid anyway, directly with handouts and tax breaks, indirectly by suppressing wages of factory workers and the value of China's currency to make the country's export artificially cheap. The result is an economic model that favors producers, restrain consumers, and flood international markets with super cheap export, including steel, solar panels, electric vehicles. Foreign companies simply cannot compete. Chinese competition is costing Germany 10,000 manufacturing jobs a month and could strip Indonesia of hundreds of thousands garment worker jobs. China's trade surplus ballooned to a record 1.2 trillion last year. As a share of global economy, China's surplus in manufactured goods is the largest amassed by any country ever. And this is again, they kind of try to reframe this as how somehow this is bad. What actually China is doing is China is making everything affordable to everyone. And again, if your argument is that somehow this is unfair, somehow Chinese government is subsidizing with these goods, then you should enjoy Chinese subsidies, at the expenses of the Chinese taxpayers. It's a gift. It's a free gift handed to you by Uncle Xi Jinping. Like this doesn't make sense. Like for example, solar panels, right? Once you install those solar panels, there's no more dependency. You are now, those solar panels will sit there and generate energy for you from the sun. You don't have any further dependency on China anymore after you have installed those solar panels. So if Xi Jinping is subsidizing solar panels, making it cheaper to install cheap electric power generation, then you should do it. You should by all means do it. But that's how of course they're not going to say that, but it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's an interesting point. Like if they were subsidizing things that got you, reliant on their system, that would be a little bit, like the Western capital model. Gillette will sell their razor handles for really cheap, but when you're ready for replacement cartridges, damn, do they get you? Like this is like what you said. You install the solar panels and they're going to work for years and years and years. They're going to take away revenues from the local energy companies, which probably is the bigger problem than anything, a bigger problem than anything else for the West. But that's a really good point. I think we've got some more economic related stuff. Let's continue on here. This one I think is yours as well.
Okay, so this guy is saying, in the 16th century Spain, confronted with Ming Dynasty overwhelming production. This is the same talking point, but they're bringing the history now. In the 16th century Spain, confronted with Ming Dynasty's overwhelming production capacity in silk and ceramics, they could only watch as silver plundered from the New World was sucked away with no decent trade goods of their own to sell. 19th century Britain faced a similar plight. The East India Company racked up deficit in tea import And with nothing to sell, they smuggle in forbidden poison of opium. When the Qing dynasty cracked down, they throw a tantrum claiming it violated the trade and fired off their cannons. And now the United States and EU are utterly defeated by China's overwhelming supply chain and cost structure in the production of EV, solar panels, and next generation infrastructure. When Mark Andreessen and other tech optimists staged their reality show proclaiming Silicon Valley innovation could conquer the world, the foundation of the Western manufacturing has been completely hollowed out. Unable to win on their own merits, with nothing to sell, this is precisely why they invoke the Roy Cohen school of ironclad rules. Who never admit defeat under any circumstances, right? The rule, and frame the opponent as a criminal, and they now trying to embed this comically over the top logic into international law that overproduction threatens global peace and it is a crime. I mean, it's well said. Very well said.
Yeah, I mean, planning for an export market is a reasonable thing. And you know what? Isn't the U.S. Their CHIPS Act, their Inflation Act, it's all subsidizing their local domestic production also. They're trying to do the same thing, but probably on a far smaller scale because too much of their national GDP is dedicated towards the military. Now imagine if they changed their priorities like China. Instead of going around the world and fighting wars, say, okay, all right, we'll compete at the same game and we'll play this game. Obviously, they're making it sustainable somehow. But yeah, it's a good response there. Now we have still economic related China high tech. Here we go.
Okay, so this is from the Economist, which is another imperialist apology rag. Yeah. And it says China's high tech boom is leaving much of the country behind. That could make starkly unequal country even more so. Like, are you kidding me? And this guy tweeting out, Jonathan Chen, I think he works for Wall Street Journal. I mean, it's incredible for American to tweet something like this, especially when the whole premise of American AI is going to make the American society even more unequal by having a bunch of tech overlords ruling over basically a feudal basically ruling over tech feudalism. Yeah. So I was being like little facetious. I just says like change the wording from China to America, you would be 100% correct. Again, it's projection, 100% projection.
Yeah. Well, that is a Carl Zah. You are known as the ultimate shit poster, but you shit post with facts. There's I think is this next one from let me see here, what is it? It's related. Oh yeah, here we go. You can it's I think it's commenting on the same article, is it?
Probably parochialism of taking everyone down. Yeah. So this is the Atlantic article, which is saying the Chinese economy is taking everyone down. Poverty perfected yourself alone. In prosperity, bring benefit to all under heaven. Mention. Mencius is the second sage of the Confucianism. The title of Michael Schumann's piece in the Atlantic is not analysis. It's an anxiety dressed up as argument, a reflex masquerading as insight. Before engaging in its claims, it's worth noting, asking the question it refused to pose. Taking everyone down from what exactly? And compared to when? The historical record is unambiguous. For roughly 18 of the past 20 centuries, the land constitute present-day China was among the top one or two economies on Earth. And what followed was a development strategy of a remarkable discipline. China investing in education, health, infrastructure, creating a foundation upon which it later transformed the later transformation would rest. Result is beyond serious dispute. China lifted more people from extreme poverty in less than any other economy in human history. Its rate of extreme poverty now rivals that of the United States. Its cities contains some of the world's most educated young workforce with 16 years of schooling common in major urban hubs. Its universities rank by methodology with no stakes in Chinese prestige, appearing regularly among world's best STEM fields. China is not merely manufacturing cheap goods, it's producing scientists, engineers, and innovators at a scale that reflects aspirations of 1.4 billion people who have every historical reasons to reclaim their place. The honest question for the Atlantic reader is not why China is rising, but why that rise produced such reflexive alarm among those who benefit the most from the century of its humiliation. Mencius offers appropriate counsel. Perfect yourself before presuming to instruct others. The United States with its this goes on. I can't read the other part, but people get the point. But people get the point.
Yeah. And then of course we had we mentioned him last week, Noah Smith. The guy who seems like he's rage baiting, but it's actually really him. It's like, let's see. Here we go.
So this again, like this one person posting the excerpt for the Economist article, China's high-tech rise is leaving much of the country behind. And Noah Smith just decided to put in his 2 cents. He said, Xi Jinping's economy does not exist for the benefit of regular Chinese people. It exists for national greatness. Now, this is coming from a guy who have never set foot onto mainland China. He admitted this to me in our debate 5 years ago, before during COVID. He said he has been to Hong Kong, but he never set foot on mainland China. He does not speak Chinese, and as far as I know, he has not since set foot on mainland China. So this guy has never been to China, yet continuously pontificating on Chinese culture, politics, etc., and posing as a public American public intellectual, a China joining the China debate, and the saying that he's saying that China's economy is not for the regular Chinese people. This is just preposterous. For anyone who has been to China, who has lived in China for extended period of time, you will see the tremendous progress China has made, and the dramatic improvement in the quality of life. I lived in China in the 1980s. I remember the days when we need ration papers to buy anything, to buy cooking oil or clothes or food. Like the level of abundance that exists in China today, which is not imaginable back when I was growing up. So to say that somehow the China's economic growth is not for the regular Chinese people, this is just bullshit, man. Like that just means he has never interacted with any real Chinese people
100%.
In China.
100%. It is the average person. It is the middle class. It is the lower class that actually he has the highest approval rating with. These are the people who love what he's doing. And on the contrary, it is the ultra rich who are far more concerned or worried because they know that there's more scrutiny under them for corruption and for all this stuff. And they also know that if they had the same amount of wealth in any Western country, they would be allowed to rule over society. I mean, look at Occupy Wall Street. That's what that whole thing was about the wealth gap, was about the inequality. And what happened since then? Nothing happens with protests there. It got worse since then. So it is the complete opposite of what they're talking about. And this is exactly what, I know it's getting old to say, but every accusation, that's exactly what this is as well. We have, so that was Noah Smith's one, number 8, still economic. Here we go. I think, is this commenting on the same thing?
These articles are so outrageous. It generated a lot of response. Justine Haig he said, I broadly agree with and he said the last part of her response is very important. So this is actually she's responding. Okay, no, this is responding to an interview with Jessica Chen Wise. And so Jessica Chen Wise original article he wrote, I'm very much of the view that the drive towards self-reliance was not an effort to dominate other countries or even these supply chains, but rather to secure a position that was unassailable, and that the means of achieving security was not being so dependent on others. And is in China's economy, there are many different actors that often overperform in search of a particular target. And it's wildly inefficient system where we can see that in their investment in semiconductors or in their EV right now, where every locality has their own kind of EV company. So there's this vast oversupply of things that the central government has sort of targeted. And so in some cases, there have been targets that were set. Sometimes they have overshot. But I do not think that emphasis or intention really was to weaponize them against the rest of the world. Although, I will say the Chinese government has very much learned from the United States application of extraterritorial export control in building export control system that they have now began to roll out. She's talking about the rare earth. And it's true. I mean, this couldn't be more obvious right now in the Chinese drive towards self-sufficiency has really paid off in the time when the Strait of Hormuz was being choked off. This because the China's massive overcapacity in solar, in wind, in hydro, and soon nuclear, China is being able to provide 86% of its own primary energy. China's oil import actually dropped. This at the same time when the production has kept going, this is going to be the year where China's oil consumption is probably peaking. And this is actually saving the rest of the world. When China is not buying as much oil in the world market, it's making it cheaper for other countries like India, Indonesia, and other countries that depend on oil imports. And again, this is nothing about trying to weaponize against the rest of the world. It's everything about building self-sufficiency so China cannot be choked off, like as the U.S. Navy often claimed, with like a chokehold on Chinese energy supply through the Strait of Malacca. Everything in China is centered around self-sufficiency and security. And this is why I was explaining people why China did this massive drive to popularize EVs, because China do not want to be dependent on foreign oil imports forever. By having EVs, China can generate this electricity for those EV internally, because China have massive power generation that's not dependent on oil and gas. And so it makes sense to have them to build all those high-speed rail that's powered by electricity. It makes sense to have them run transport on EVs, and now they're transitioning to even trucks, to electric trucks. Right. So this is the idea that somehow China is doing this to weaponize against the rest of the world. Again, this is 100% projection.
Right. Yeah. China never really prioritized turning their economy into a weapon, turning parts of its economy into a weapon. But you can be sure as hell that the U.S. is incentivizing that. They are incentivizing that so that they have retaliatory measures. Like they don't really have much at their disposal. Rare earths is a big one, but that came out only after they were being attacked. And lucky they had at least something, because it allowed the U.S. to back off of it. I think what's perhaps an even bigger problem than that is China's production and the types of products they're doing is they are giving other countries a way to exit from America's economic weapons across the board. I mean, the fact that so many countries are looking at EVs now because of the crisis that was caused by the U.S., this is going to reduce their reliance on an oil market that in many ways is largely controlled by the U.S. They're able to affect the price of oil around the world by their actions really easily. Obviously, you also have more countries looking at the renminbi as a trade settlement option. That is also going to be an exit from a highly weaponized U.S.-dominated system. That's probably the bigger issue. But they have to frame it as China's building economic, weapons. But the bigger issue is that China is building an exit from U.S. economic weapons. I think that's what I think is going on. What do you think?
Exactly, you nailed it. Because right now, a lot of the countries are experiencing economic issues, like where I am in Indonesia, where the currency is falling, depreciating, especially in relationship to U.S. dollars, and yet countries like Indonesia, which needed those dollars to do their imports, see their import costs risen, and so what you're going to have is devaluation of the local currencies, inflation, and people's livelihood is getting impacted. If they had what China had, this is why China's productive capacity is actually what insulated it from the crisis that just happened. And if this country, for example, didn't have to deal with the U.S. dollars, they would have avoided a lot of these current problems that they're besetted with. But you're right. Like, the United States is really alarmed that there might be a drive away from the U.S. dollar due to the policies that the United States government itself is pushing. And so they wanted to shift the focus to China bad. Don't be like China.
Absolutely. I'm not sure if this is a repeat because I see I've got another Noah Smith one here. Let's see.
I think it's a comment on the Noah Smith.
Right.
So he just saying, like, look, this is one of the most off-target criticism of Xi I can think of, and he just corresponded to what you said earlier. Xi is actually more popular among working class people and those in the rural area than urban elite. I can confirm this, just through my own network of friends and families. This is because his heavy focus on poverty alleviation, rural development, and bringing the wealthy. Yes, like a lot of the rich Chinese, I know they don't like Xi Jinping, but Xi Jinping is a lot more popular among the working class people. Yeah.
Probably what's driving China maxing also. Well, I'll start off with saying, do you remember when NPR and CGTN worked together on a poverty alleviation documentary that really went into depth into how China solved China's poverty problem and had one of the biggest upliftings from poverty ever in the history of our planet? And it really is amazing. I mean, it was just so well planned out how they had different government workers going into these villages, and also giving, not only just giving handouts, but giving villagers the tools for sustainability. And you know what happened to that documentary, right? When it was scheduled to air in the U.S.?
Yeah, it got canned. The U.S. politician went up in arms. And like, these are actually a really well-made documentary. I learned a lot from that. I saw they had I think there was a segment on like a rural county around Chongqing, and they have these university students from Chongqing. They actually travel to these remote villages to act as monitors, making sure those officials are doing their job in the poverty alleviation. They actually audit them, make sure they're not pocketing the funds or say they're doing things but actually not following up. And so it was quite enlightening how to understand in concrete steps how Chinese government was able to lift 800 million people out of extreme poverty. But again, that's something they do not want to show to American people, because you might get the wrong ideas.
Not only you get the wrong idea, but China and Xi Jinping is actually applying and addressing all of the things that the people in the West want addressed, cracking down on tech billionaires, lifting people out of poverty, focusing on the lower class or the middle class, that being the priority. Like, he's literally answering the dreams and hopes that Westerners have and hope that their government will address. And imagine how devastating that would be, saying, hold on a second, the country you're telling us to hate is doing all the things for us that we want you to do for us. Then these campaigns against China all of a sudden start making sense. We have.
I mean, this is why China maxing is a thing among the youngers, among the Zoomers. This is mostly a reaction against what they see this corrupt Epstein government is like squeezing their own citizens and choking off the future prospect of the youth. So they rather look to China as an alternative example, and and this is mostly, again, mostly it was driven by the youth themselves. But you will have American politicians like Hillary Clinton who will say, "Oh, this is because the Chinese Communist Party is using TikTok to influence our young, misleading our youth, spreading anti-Semitism against Israel." Totally unacceptable.
They really have to keep it secret how the West, particularly the U.S., actually works. I mean, I remember back when Julian Assange, and he's been, kind of neutered since then, but he said it so well when he was talking about the war in Afghanistan, and he was being asked about, winning the war in Afghanistan. And he said the point isn't to win the war. The point is to draw it out as long as possible so that they can wash money from the U.S. tax base into weapons manufacturers. And then obviously those weapons manufacturers fund the same politicians who are making the decisions to spend U.S. tax dollars on those kinds of things, whether it be through tax dollars or whether it be through printing more money, which ultimately reduces the value of the money that U.S. citizens do have. And when you really look at that, when you really look at how the whole system is designed, you are literally stuck in this dystopian corporation that is just designed to suck you dry and support the upper class. And people are waking up to that. It probably would have happened even without the help of looking onto China and seeing a model where it's being, where there's a system that actually can serve the people. But I would imagine you could only keep that lie up for so long. You could only hide that reality from people for so long. And obviously it's falling apart now.
Yep.
Yeah. We have, this is another one you've sent over. Patents.
Yes. So the story from Reuters is China owned more than 11,000 German developed patents. Study shows the actual story is actually China went out and bought and paid for those German patents. And the quote tweet says, "Did you know China has a database of foreign patents, the patent holders, researcher, and companies?" People could probably guess that part. Did you know they also score them by expected value and other metrics? So no, this isn't an accident or natural evolution. Again, this balding guy, he's just like Gordon Chan. He's implying like China is engaging in systematic industrial espionage. Look, China went to pay and bought for those patents. I mean, it's all above the table. And so the reply guy said, "Did you know that patents are public information and you can find copy of every patent ever filed anywhere simply by going to WIPO's website?" Now, this actually says is that China is actually taking public intellectual property seriously now. That's why they went ahead and bought them. They bought those commercial patents so they can be. And another reason China does that is because China is very good at scaling. They're very good at commoditizing the production and scaling,
bringing it to life,
and make it affordable for everyone. China have mastered that into an art. So that is a part that West has difficulty to compete with. They're have difficulty to compete with China's massive economy of scale. And of course, Chinese industry are often very cutthroat and competitive. But it's just they can't compete, so they have to continue to manufacture those narratives to paint China as bad when it doesn't really help them. It doesn't really help them to compete with China by producing this kind of copiants.
Yeah, I mean, the patent system was designed obviously to protect ideas if they're your own, so that you can monetize it yourself, or you can get compensated for creating that idea. And China's doing exactly what was intended. They are compensating people for those patents, but when they buy them, they're wording it as being seized, and yet America owns 1/3 of all of German's foreign patents also. So, but again, if America buys it, it is a regular economic activity. If China buys it, it's an issue, and it's being quote unquote seized, as they say. We have this is a good one. Here we go. It's another one of yours.
Oh, so this is I wasn't being facetious when I said U.S. is alarmed that China is trying to cure cancer, because you actually read the article, like talking about China's rise in the drug development. You talk about China is trying to find cures for cancer, different drugs for treating cancer, and this is what alarms the Western pharmaceutical companies, because they don't actually want to cure cancer. They want to be able to want you to have those conditions, but they will sell you drugs just to treat the symptoms.
Treatment is more profitable than a cure.
Exactly, because that threatened their business model. Their business model is collecting rent. This is a lot of the Western economic activity now is rent seeking, by these oligarchic companies. Yeah.
I mean, you've got cars now that you have to pay a monthly fee to activate the heated seats. Like, it's like, come on, and it lends credibility to quote unquote conspiracy theorists who say that we could have long figured out a lot of many cures for cancer, but a lot of the times there's something on the table that gets scrapped. Like, you always hear this big breakthrough, like this, young scientist. I remember there was a Canadian high schooler from Canada also, who came up with this really amazing possible cure that was showing a lot of promise. He was this genius kid, and then one of the companies bought it up, and it just kind of disappeared afterwards. Now, people might say, well, maybe it didn't pass trials, didn't go through it. But there are people who always thought, no, they're not trying to find a cure. And this lends credibility to that theory, where all of a sudden somebody else is close to finding a cure, or they're prioritizing finding a cure. And they're saying, oh, this is bad. They had the previous article a couple of years ago saying China might be curing cancer too fast, or China is curing cancer, but at what cost? The famous words, but at what cost? Like, I mean, this reveals
$1 billion to the U.S. pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah, they won't actually say that, but that's the truth. My apologies. I have some stuff that is not in the correct order, I'm noticing here. So we're kind of jumping around a little bit. I'll try to rearrange these a bit. But we are going back to patents now. I see what's going wrong here, but I'll reorganize the images, but you can go ahead with this one. We're going to jump back a little bit.
I think we lost Mr. Daniel for a second. So now it's my show. Welcome to the Silicon Steel Podcast. I'm your host, Carl Zha. We'll wait for Daniel to come back. But in the meantime, if there's any questions you'd like to ask me, this is your chance. This is the AMA session. Ask me anything session. So let's not waste time. And the chat, if you have any questions for me, this is the chance to ask. I'm wide open. Oh, Daniel is back. Yeah, I was going to turn into an AMA session while you're gone, but okay. Daniel,
you go ahead while I'm. You go ahead. You talk a little bit while I'm sorting out my connection and also rearranging the media assets here.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right,
you
guys.
Can go through the comments.
We have a Q&A session right now. We're holding an impromptu Q&A session. And Carl Zha, do you watch C dramas? Yes. I haven't. Not as much as I would like, but I enjoy the last one I enjoyed was Tai Pinyan, or The Sword into Plowshare. I didn't finish it though, because I watched it maybe like halfway. It was very good. I think it's one of the better historical C-dramas coming out. And my wife was actually asked me the other day to recommend her some C-dramas. So if you guys know any, let me know. I'll pass along to my wife. I just told her about The Pursuit of Jade because that's what's popular right now, both in and outside of China. There's a lot of C-drama that has gained a lot of popularity, particularly in Southeast Asia. Our babysitter, our like 21-year-old babysitter, was watching like C-drama all the time. Like this is Bali. She obviously was watching through subtitles, and so they like now. I used to joke the anime and K-pop are just gateway drugs for the true Chinese soft power because most of the people can't tell the difference anyway. So first you soft them up with anime and K-pop, and then C-dramas. But it's actually happening. It's happening in real life. I see like C-drama is gaining a lot of popularity right now. At least where I am so Carl, tell your wife to watch Zhao Adventures. Okay, I don't even know that one. I have to look it up. Mo Li, The First Jasmine. Okay, cool. I'm getting a lot of C-drama recommendations.
There we go.
That along to my wife. Finally, something useful. All right. So
okay,
Zhao is here just blocking. No, I don't block people because I actually like it when people hate watching me. the fact that I like the idea that somebody hate watching me while helping with a YouTube algorithm to funnel more traffic to my show. I'm all for that. Anyway, so Daniel, are you ready?
I'm ready. Let me just go through. I'm not sure which one of these patent ones we've already covered. This one
we've done that one. Yeah.
Okay, we've done that one. Okay. And then how about this one? It's not showing up on my screen. So did we do this?
Yeah, we didn't. It said please tell him in that report why the control over German patents by countries like United States and Switzerland is more often seen as normal competition.
This is one
Yeah. And while China's acquisition is regarded as abnormal market behavior. That's the point that you brought up.
This guy. What was his name again? Sydney Daddy, right? He's
actually a dissident.
He is.
He's actually a big critic of China normally.
He comes across as somebody who's a little bit more mentally stable than Gordon Chang. And he's able to make his points in a way where it sounds reasonable on the surface, but you're like, what the heck are you talking about? The danger actually comes from the U.S., who will sometimes force their own allies to sell their prized companies, like the French Alstom, their prized energy company. They had held Frederick Perucci hostage until they were willing to sell it to GE. They regularly neuter their own allies when it's in their own interests. Can you still hear me? I'm not sure if I'm lagging.
Yeah. I can hear you.
Yeah. So they're painting China, who's going around and paying good money for all of these patents, as the villain, when there is so much more risk when you're dealing with the U.S. Who was it who said, it's dangerous to be China's enemy, but it's fatal to be their friend.
Kissinger said it's dangerous to be United States enemy, but it's fatal to be its friends.
Yeah. So I don't know what point he's trying to make there, but it does not make sense when you look at the reality of how the world works. What do we have next? Let me know if I've done any of these. Oh, this one went a lot longer than this, but hopefully this will jog your memory and you can comment on what he was talking about.
Actually, I have David Fisherman's tweet thread lined up on my machine. So again, this is in response to an article about how the profit margin shrinking China's auto industry. Auto parts maker are increasingly turn to robotics as new growth engine, tapping their manufacturing supply chain and component expertise into a potentially massive future market. This is by Michael Pettis, who is a professor at the Bacon University, but he's like the thinking man's Gordon Chan. He's been like poo-pooing China's growth for like the last 20 years. But he continued. He said that's a bad thing that China is turning into advanced is employing AI and robotics and advanced manufacturing, because he says as evolution wipes out profit margin in EV industry, EV producers are turning into robotics, where ironically profit margins are even worse. And this isn't because of stupidity. They're responding correctly to the incentives they face. In an economy in which unit labor costs are among the lowest in the world, you would expect the most competitive producer to specialize in labor-intensive industries. But in China, many of them are rushing into politically preferred industries because in these industries, the cost of capital, including subsidized equipment and logistics, is even lower. They get unlimited credit as low rate with no hard budget constraint. Under these conditions, it's natural shift even more from labor-intensive industry to capital-intensive one. I mean, this is just wrong on so many levels because, first of all, China's wage labor has been rising steadily over the last 20 years. Now, the China's manufacturing labor cost is actually higher, much higher than countries like Vietnam, India, much of Southeast Asia. Yet those industries are not leaving China because China have figured out how to manufacture at scale and employing advanced technology into the manufacturing. What Michael Pettis is really saying is China should stick with labor-intensive industries like making shoes and toys for the United States. You know, China has no business making EVs. So in response, another guy, Isabella Kamiska, chime in to support Michael Pettis by saying, below story about Chinese tech evolution is really insightful. I think it perfectly explains why China has such difficulty reinvesting its capital in the West beyond purely financial asset or asset it wants to strategically sabotage. Chinese FDI fell quite sharply post 2018, and it's not just because Western countries become more wary of Chinese control and influence. The documentary American Factory, that was a documentary produced by Obama, perfectly illustrated the beginning of the evolution problem. The Chinese factory model, when powered by cheap exploited labor, simply cannot be replicated competitively in the West, at least not without making the West visibly poor, something that would likely trigger a political backlash. The documentary tracks successful attempts by Chinese owners to block American unionization to protect profitability. The Chinese managers are also regularly bewildered by American labor norms. But the reason their investment eventually fail has little to do with Americans being lazy or over-unionized. On the contrary, it's because when one's comparative advantage is cheap labor and repression, it's impossible to make that model work anywhere that doesn't abide the same norm. This limits Chinese corporate expansion to jurisdiction with poor labor protection and standards or non-democracy. This is why China's American investment are eventually abandoned in favor of BRI countries, jurisdiction where China had more clout and influence over local governments and such greater ability to run exploitative models. It's also helped that these populations are generally poor and had to take terms as presented. But even that strategy is becoming increasingly politically contentious. This left China with no choice but to compete technologically. After all, only alternative to the points are bankrupting its primary customer and trade partner, aka the force that power what growth it has. Number two, writing off the wealth he thought he had on the ground. It is no longer materializable, a move that essentially locks its own people into exploitative condition for the long term. Number three, annexing foreign countries so that the foreign population can be forced to work in exploitative condition instead. So far, China is opting for the technological path. But as the below story illustrates, the more China gives up on its true comparative advantage, large, cheap workforce, in favor of technological advances, the more likely it's going to turn into evolution. And this is because without natural input cost advantage, it has to compete on an actual merit and non-human labor cost control. The problem for China is that simply shifting toward automation and technology is no guarantee of success, especially if its overall production is far more capital and energy intensive than the older way of doing things. It might not even guarantee greater efficiency, since foreign competition will no longer be put up by inability to emulate exploitative working practice their system won't tolerate. On the contrary, China will now be the one constrained by its own ability to adopt Western practices, notably the art of yielding to consumer feedback and power, cost control, and respect for hard budget constraints. This is a very common talking point about in the West about China's rise, how China's rise must be powered by slave labor. I have been hearing this since 1990s. I mean, it's the same talking point. Despite that, the Chinese working conditions have improved drastically over the last 30 years. So David Litterman, who works in the Chinese energy sector, he wrote a whole Twitter thread to counter this argument. He said this argument keeps describing what China's actual source of competitiveness are, then treating those bad descriptions as explanatory. This is the problem. This Isabella fellow is quoting Michael Pettis. It's like garbage in, garbage out, and then eventually it will feed to like the bottom feeder, like Noah Smith, and then they will regurgitate it, and then spill out as a popular conventional wisdom. But David Fisherman, who actually understands how China works, being a long-term resident of China, working in the Chinese energy sector, he wrote a thread. He said, rather than rebut every bad conclusion, it's more useful to identify and refute false premises that cause most of the damage. Let's go. False premise number one, cheap exploited labor is China's defining comparative advantage. This is the biggest and most obvious error, implying multiple places throughout the argument. Obviously still has a 2005 era or earlier model of Chinese industry, which is undermining all the subsequent analysis. An explanation of Chinese competitiveness assumed low wages, weak labor protection, and scalability via labor abundance was never the whole story. This is particularly wrong today. Supply chain expert and procurement people have been trying to explain why Chinese manufacturing hasn't immediately slipped away to cheaper labor markets like India or Vietnam for a while now. But it seems some China econ opinion havers still haven't heard about it. More serious analysis today attributes Chinese manufacturing advantage to things like industrial cluster, supplier density, rapid iteration, economies of scale for capex, high quality infrastructure, strong national local government coordination, and extreme domestic competition, among others. If you refuse to acknowledge this, your argument will always keep circling back to unsophisticated caricature of low-cost labor exploitation. False premise number two, industrial upgrading is some kind of forced pathology. This idea is particularly odd that China is forced into technology and innovation because its exploitative labor model doesn't work abroad. It's also completely backwards. Moving up the industrial value chain is what all mature industrial economies have done and try to do as their wage rise and their demographic shift. It's not some desperate last resort unique to China. Cultivating the technological and human capital to pursue such sector already indicate merit accumulated from prior generators of industrial activity and has been the explicit long-term goal from the dawn of China's modern industrialization. It seems that OP understand China's expansion into high-tech sectors like clean tech, battery, robotics, EV, as forced because China has run out of way to exploit cheap labor and now must compete on real merit rather than endogenous natural transitions. This is even a sillier suggestion. This is even a sillier suggestion that China not supposed to do these things because its comparative advantage lies elsewhere, cheap exploited labor. See false premises number one. And false premise number 3, seeing FDI pattern being part of a moral story rather than just following normal institutional policy incentives. So there's a kernel of truth here. Chinese outbound FDI into developed world has declined, and firms do face genuine friction operating across very different regulatory, labor, and political systems. But then interpret declining Chinese FDI as proof Chinese firm cannot function in rich democracy, which is some classic motivated reason if I ever seen it. There's a long list of things you could and should look into first to understand why Chinese FDI might decline, including tightening Chinese capital control, increasing emphasis on deleveraging domestic firms, greater pressure and scrutiny from regulators in host countries, national security and geopolitics concerns, sector-level restriction, i.e. on fossil fuel investment, reduced appetite for risk from Chinese companies after a decade plus of often dubious return on their overseas ventures. Any one of these or combination thereof is a more empirically sensible way to understand why Chinese outbound FDI might slow down rather than the smug moral narrative. But why would we be interested in complexity and nuance? False premise number 4, Western industrial strength embody merit and morality. Chinese industrial strength embody low merits and immorality. Right at the end of that post, there was a singular chauvinistic implication that the West has some unique ownership over innovation, cost control, consumer feedback, or respect for budget constraint. That will pose a challenge for Chinese companies because they apparently are just too undisciplined and immoral to understand such things. So Chinese strengths are implicitly illegitimate or coercive, and Western strengths are neutral, normal, and organically meritocratic. And if Chinese firms were become more meritorious, they are they're only doing so because they're forced to, not because of some natural institutional evolution. When you start to keeping a sharp eye for the civilization chauvinism from Western econ pundits, you will realize that it's everywhere. It's 2026. We're still pretending this is serious analysis instead of a chronic superiority complex in a trench coat. Premise number 5. The involution is a broad symptom of civilization disease in the Chinese industrial sector, not just a sector-level phenomenon. We already seen a lot of misunderstanding of involution in Western punditry. I have previously been critical of how other European econ pundits have misused it, and now I realize all belongs to the same clique. So the repeated error is not surprising. Involution is not a broad diagnosis of China's modernization path. It shouldn't lazily be taken to mean too much competition or not enough reward for too much effort. It describes a specific phenomena in emerging specific sectors under specific conditions, which include overcapacity, policy distortion, and sluggish demand. Because the involution is not a catch-all description of China's economic industrial model, it can't mean industrial upgrading or automations are futile. In fact, diversifying into higher productivity activities seems to like a very sensible way to escape this kind of low margin trap that unabated involution threaten. So yeah, this post doesn't just get a few details wrong. It's constructed on a fundamentally mistaken model of how the Chinese economy works. It's rotten to the baseboard. Worst of all, if you think about it, there's literally nothing here that helps anyone to think about how to compete with China. It's all useless reassurances that China either cannot do what it's doing or that it can, but it doesn't count because it's not moral enough. No strategy, no model, no serious engagement with reality, just smug, self-congratulatory whining and cope. And this is, he said it better than I could. This is just copian, and it actually does not help the West compete with China in any way. It only offers a psychological comfort to think we are still morally superior to those inscrutable Oriental Chinese. But yeah, I don't know what you have to add to that.
Yeah, no, that's pretty concise. Nobody can beat David on the way that he puts things together. He is. He's right up there with, Arnaud Bertrand does some really great commentary also. He is up there. He's one of the most underappreciated accounts on X, and I recommend that everybody follows him. I mean, he pretty much says it all.
Yeah, he actually responded one more bonus round because Isabel Kamishka doubled down. Because she said people seem to have real trouble understanding that just because something is technologically possible or optically impressive doesn't mean it's necessarily commercially cost-effective to deploy at scale. China is experiencing evolution because its technological success in the lab do not necessarily translate into commercially viable technology at scale. We know this because of its ongoing reliance on subsidy to mask non-viability. In tech, this really advanced. If the tech is really advanced, you would be capable of maintaining market share without subsidies. This is equivalent of scientists generating fusion in a lab and choose to roll out commercially before proving they can generate a net energy gain from the technology. What happened then? Rather than generating positive sum effect for the world, it generates an energy succubus black hole. And to this, David responds, this is the bonus round. The continue on the credibility incinerating campaign with a batch of claims that are even more dubious than the last. Unfortunately, with a smugness and condescension that certainly hasn't been earned. Quote here, China is experiencing evolution because its technological success in the lab do not necessarily translate into commercially viable technology at scale. This is exactly backward. China's obvious strength over the last 20 years has been scaling and commercialization of things that weren't able to escape the lab environment elsewhere in the world. Ironically, the most enduring critique of China's industrial sector, tech sector, has historically been that it struggles with innovation at the frontier, i.e. lab work, while being strong in deployment and scaling. Because of this, sour grape narrative about Chinese technology achievement usually revert to angle like, well, they may have built it and scaled it, but they didn't invent it, which I have been hearing endlessly for the last decade when it comes to pretty much every technology in energy sector. Although there's also that is also changing now too. And again, what do you think evolution means here? It's not being used to describe outcome of an inability to scale technology commercially. Come on now. Again, quoting, if the tech is really advanced, you will be capable of maintaining market share without subsidies. This is a deeply unserious way of thinking about industrial economies and reveal an issue more profound than classic China bad punditry. State support and subsidy show up pretty much everywhere across advanced tech at every stage of product development and deployment in pretty much every country. By this logic, US semiconductors, the European aerospace sector, or early renewable industry in the West were also all not generating real advances. You can dislike subsidies and argue against them without degrading the entire conversation into unsophisticated slop like subsidy equal non-viable. And the fusion analogy makes no sense. Fusion has fundamental physics constraints, and it either works, reaches net energy gain, or it doesn't. So far, it doesn't. Most industrial technologies are way past that. They first work technologically in lab setting, but are expensive or impractical, then get better over time in real world via iteration, incremental improvement, economies of scale, and supply chain maturation, which private capital often doesn't have the patience or stomach for. That is the point of state support, to take a longer view on strategically valuable technology than market do on their own. Wow, this David blow it out of the water here.
Yeah, he does. And it goes one step further, beyond saying that the West also subsidizes certain industries. They actually go one step further. They don't only just subsidize companies and industries so that they can go on and develop something great. In some cases, they even develop the tech themselves. Like, for example, the founding infrastructure for the internet was developed by the U.S. military. It was developed with public funds. It wasn't, encouraged. They didn't encourage a private company to do it, but they did then hand over that technology to a private company to completely profit from. So it was socialized development and completely privatized profits. So it's goes even one step further than what China's doing, which that should be a greater outrage to the ordinary person.
Yep.
Yeah. Let's move on to the next one, which is kind of, the same thing in the same category. So this is one that I brought up that Luke pointed out, that the White House is looking at overhauling U.S. science funding. Now, why this is really interesting, I think for two reasons. One, it creates a really interesting problem, or not interesting, a big issue, where you can have an administration that comes in and completely overhauls the direction of scientific institutions like this every 4 years. Imagine how much this is going to hamper U.S. development. But perhaps what's even more important than that is they always accuse Chinese institutions and Chinese educational institutes, all of these kinds of scientific bodies, of being completely associated with and connected to the Chinese Communist Party. But that's essentially what they're trying to do here in the U.S., is overhaul all of these industries. So it is basically just a political arm of the government. It is completely controlled by the government. It becomes everything that they claim that these Chinese institutions are. Like, for example, with NVIDIA's CEO, when he goes on the board of Tsinghua University, like, oh no, that's a Chinese Communist Party controlled entity. Well, that's what they're trying to turn the U.S. into. Their imagination of how China works is what they actually want for themselves. And I know we've said it many times again, but it goes back to every accusation. What are your thoughts on this?
Trump administration is really destroying all the advantages that U.S. empire used to enjoy over its rivals. I mean, he's like, I'm old enough to remember people say China will not be able to compete with United States because U.S. has the ability to brain drain the rest of the world. But the best and the brightest, they come to the United States and then they contribute to the U.S. advancement. Where China, they can only rely on Chinese people inside China, and not even that, because a lot of the top level Chinese people come to United States to work. And this is why U.S. will remain ahead of China. Yet here we are in 2026. Trump is raging the China initiative to prosecute all the Chinese origin researchers and scientists, and he's cutting the science and fundings to science, and basically destroying all the premises that the supposed advantage that the United States do enjoy over China. And while China is going the opposite direction, China is actually welcoming people to come to China. There are now many non-ethnic Chinese people who are going to China to join research. Luke himself is an example. He went to China to get a PhD in AI in medical research because he said that was one of the best place to do it. And so Trump, man. Trump is my president.
You on that point too. You are seeing a shift. Here at the international school, most of the foreign students were here working for American companies in China. For example, Ford used to have a huge manufacturing base and research facilities here in Chongqing, and there was a massive community of Americans here working for Ford. They left, and for a period of time, pretty much the only people that were here were basically Chinese students with overseas passports or Koreans. There's a big Korean community here in Chongqing. This year, it has really started to change. We've seen so many additional foreign faces come in, and they are no longer coming to work for foreign companies in Chongqing. They're actually working for BYD. They're actually working for all of these different Chinese companies. And I mentioned it to the school also. I said, this is really interesting. It shows a really positive change, that if you ever did have foreigners here, they were doing their own thing here. But now Chinese companies have gotten to a point where they're bringing the talent in now, and they're willing to contribute to these companies. So it is definitely a really interesting shift.
I think that trend will continue as Chinese brand continue to gain recognition abroad. Like ZX Moto Moto, a Chongqing motorcycle brand that's now suddenly emerging in the world, right? Like catching people's attention. Sorry, I just have to give them a shout out because I'm from Chongqing, and Chongqing is like the motorcycle capital of China. And so yeah, so like I think that trend will likely accelerate in the future as well.
I actually watched the video this morning where there was this guy, he has this motorcycle review channel, and it was, I need to issue a public apology to ZX Moto, because he had made a video on them months ago. And the previous video, he was really hard on them. He says like, where's this company coming out of nowhere? Like, look at their aspirations. This is ridiculous. This isn't going to happen. And so he says, wow. He says he has to completely take that back. And then he even went further. He went further, saying that so many of these Chinese companies are driven by a passion rather than maximizing the shareholders' return. Because he said some of these decisions they make do not make sense as a business decision, but it is this guy following his passion, saying, no, we got to do this. Even this is going to be a longer route, this is what it needs to be about. And he was invigorated by that when he compares it to a lot of overseas brands that first and foremost, it's about the bottom line, it's about the shareholders. So he completely changed his perspective on that. So yeah, absolutely. Shout out to ZX Moto because they definitely deserve that. We'll go on to the next one.
We should get a endorsement from them.
I'm ZX Moto. If anybody from ZX Moto is watching, I'm here in Chongqing. I've got 3 motorbikes. I wouldn't mind having a 4th. Truth is, I'm probably going to buy one of yours anyway, eventually, even if you don't sponsor it. But pretend you didn't hear that part, and pretend that I need you to help put one in my hands in order for me to get on one.
Yeah, and the Chang'an automobile, I could use a SUV in Bali.
We're here for you guys. We're here for you guys. No, absolutely. I was reading the comments also on that video, and they were talking about how the CEO is actually on live streams every week, talking directly to customers and addressing any of their issues, any repair concerns, anything like that. Like he says, like, can you imagine a foreign CEO doing this? Like, they're just raving about it. And in the beginning, you had, especially, of course, when it's a new brand, you had certain things that would break down. But the one thing that ZX Moto has always had a really good reputation for was that whenever you have anything wrong, they just fix it for you. They even send you the part, no questions asked. They send you a part, say, here you go. And you can go to one of their shops and change it. Really, really good support. But yeah, I feel like this is going to sound like a sponsored video, but it's absolutely not. But once again, ZX Moto, if you want it to be, I'm here. I'm here in Chongqing. You don't have to ship it too far. All right, let's go on to another one that you brought up here. Here we go.
Okay, so let me. Okay, so this is by our good friend Arnold. There you go. This is FT did the article on U.S. National Security Agency used Anthropic's methods for cyber attack against China and Iran. And Arnold says, here you go. FT confirmed that not only the NSA is using Anthropic's AI for offensive cyber operations against nations such as China or Iran, but Anthropic is actively helping them in that effort. As per article, Anthropic installed about half a dozen staff within NSA as so-called forward deployed engineers to guide the use of technology and customizing model for specific applications. He confirms 2 things. First, the U.S. is the most aggressive state actor in cyberspace so far. He offensively infiltrate other nations' network, and how he's supercharging this capability with AI. Heck, that literally one of the core mission statement of NSA, one of the largest security agency of the U.S. government. Second, Anthropic's carefully cultivated image as the ethical, safety-first AI company that partnered with the church is a fiction. In reality, the most deeply embedded AI company in the U.S. security state. Instead of building guardrails, they are literally weaponizing their own AI inside their own AI inside the NSA. Again, every accusation is a confession, because this is the kind of stuff they throw against the Chinese AI companies. They're saying, "Oh, they're gonna, China is gonna weaponizing us to wage cyber attack against U.S. power grids. What if they bring down, like, shut down our power, shut down our electricity, our signaling system?" This is exactly what United States does.
Yeah, and also they use the accusation without any actual evidence of Chinese military ties for companies, whether it's, what is it called, HK Vision, a camera company, whether it's Huawei, anything. Like, they use that as a reason to sanction it, saying it is dangerous, it should be sanctioned. And what they should, if you're using their own logic, every single country in the world should be banning this AI platform, because it absolutely is the thing that the U.S. says would be a national threat if any other country was doing it, a national security threat. So, I mean, you can't say enough. Everything just comes back to every accusation over and over again.
Yeah.
We have the next one is another one that you brought up here, the Iran war strategy. Take it away.
Right. So this is Steve Chu, who's actually a fellow graduate from Caltech. He's talking about that kabuki theater between Netanyahu and Donald Trump. Supposedly they had a disagreement. So this is Steve Chu. He has his contact in Beijing. He said this is what he heard in Beijing: the Iran war is a strategic gift, geostrategic gift to China. Washington has once again allowed Israeli strategic priority to override its own national interests, bleeding military power and diplomatic capital into a conflict that serves Tel Aviv, not Washington. The U.S. has become the enforcer for foreign powers' regional ambition, and the hubris will accelerate its relative decline faster than any Chinese missiles could. Hard to argue with that.
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple of fronts. Yeah, it takes attention away from this pivot to Asia thing, but it also creates a global perspective where China looks like the more responsible party. Now, I will say, though, that a good friend of mine, you know him too, Ben Norton, he has a different perspective on the Israel-U.S. relationship. Whether you believe this angle or not, it's up to you, but I'll put it out there. He says that actually what the U.S. is doing in the Middle East is something that they want to do anyway, but they can use Israel as an excuse, even if they have to look like on the surface to some people that they are subservient to Israel, that it is Israel pushing them to do all this stuff, but actually it's stuff that they want to do anyway. But they can use Israel as a scapegoat, even if it makes them look weak in the process in terms of being, beholden to Israel foreign policy. It's a possible theory, but whatever the case may be, it doesn't make a difference in terms of the key point here, which is it's a strategic gift to China.
Yeah, Trump is accelerating the American imperial decline. This is why he's my president. Make China great again.
Mm-hmm. Here we go. This is one I believe I brought this one out. The Chinese Communist Party operates a mafia that intends to continue killing thousands of Americans through fentanyl trafficking. Let's watch the video and see what he says. And let me see if we have it here.
President Obama, President Trump, President Biden, now President Trump again, have all interacted with Xi Jinping about this topic. He has lied to all of them about enforcement. At some point, we have to draw the conclusion that we're dealing with essentially a mafia that's not getting out of the business. And so it's only going to change if we are making it have to adjust its behavior. The president, I know, has raised it at a personal level with Xi Jinping. There is some cooperation that happens. Usually it will be intelligence that China will provide us to enforce in our country. But it's odd that they can provide the intelligence to find these individuals in the United States, but are somehow not able to find factories that have to operate at a scale to kill 500,000 people. So these cannot be things that are hiding underground. They are findable. And so it's a question of will. For any of us that have been dealing with China for a long time, in the bad old days, and maybe still to today, when you were engaged in a political crime, you could be put to death and your family was forced to pay for the bullet. Who has been forced to pay for the bullet in China for what they've done to us?
Actually, this is one that you brought up. I'll just say one thing beforehand. Like, they are expecting China to be their DEA, to clean up their issues that they're responsible for cleaning up. You know, China is providing, they call it precursors to fentanyl. I mean, water is pre-fentanyl, also goes into that too. You could literally label that anything. There is an actual medical use for that. But, it is American pharmaceutical companies that drove an opioid crisis where they legally got their own citizens addicted to painkillers and all of these things. Like, the crisis comes from within. And now they're trying to not only scapegoat it on China, but asking China to solve their own domestic issue, which is their responsibility.
And Sackler family, the family that was responsible for promoting the opioid crisis in the United States, they got off with a slap on the wrist. I mean, it's like, again, nobody was really held responsible. And the speaker, Stephen Yates, I have to give you his credential here. He served as a deputy national security advisor to Dick Cheney from 2001 and 2005 during the Iraq War. And he was the last president of the Radio Free Asia. So, it's important to understand people's background. And now he works at the, Heritage Foundation, which is another neocon think tank. That's all they do. They just produce this kind of copium all day and they say China bad and distract from what U.S. is doing to China. Again, you mentioned China is one of the largest producers of pharmaceutical ingredient in the world. 80% of the antibiotics in the United States is sourced from China, and so this is why they make chemical precursors that is a legitimate pharmaceutical ingredient, except those are being imported by American and Mexican gangs into North America and synthesized into fentanyl in North America. And again, this is China actually had a agreement with U.S. law enforcement, where Chinese law enforcement will trace the shipments of fentanyl precursors that leaves their factory to make sure they don't end up in the wrong hands. Now, because Trump's administration's first term against all these sanctions against China, claiming China is putting secret police stations in U.S. soil, China called off their law enforcement cooperation with the United States. Now, that was reinstated, actually, supposed to have reinstated after Xi Jinping met with Biden in San Francisco. So I had to look up what's the current status. So China is agreeing right now to work with the U.S. law enforcement to restart this tracement program. They will trace where those fentanyl precursors, chemicals will be sent. So it's absolutely not true that China is not doing something to, in coordination with the United States. This is shifting the blame. It's like the root cause of the opiate crisis in the United States is the decline of the U.S. society. That is what's driven people to seek, escape through the opioids. I mean, but they will never address those problems.
That's amazing. I didn't realize they had a physical presence trying to help them track this issue and see when, for example, a particular shipment was destined for a hospital, but then it got, taken over by the mafia and sent to these groups. And so the U.S. was expecting and asked them to be their DEA. And once they tried to help out, all of a sudden they used it as oh my gosh, they're doing, legal, police adjacent work in our country, just like they asked us to. but they needed a villain that they're even they're willing to shoot themselves in their own foot, when they were, like you said, willing and ready and actually beginning to help. You highlighted one of the responses to that. I guess you like this. As a shit poster, I guess you would really enjoy this one. Yeah.
So there's I for the record, I actually don't know that Chinese saying, but according to this guy, he said there's a guy. Sorry, can you raise that up a little bit? So because okay, now
I can't, but I can. Oh, actually, maybe I can. Maybe I can do it like this. Well, this. Let me see if this change.
I can see it now. There's a Chinese saying, a man with a crooked penis peeing outside the toilet bowl and then blames the toilet for being installed crooked. That's essentially the story of fentanyl. Well put. I actually personally do not know that idiom. If people know the original Chinese phrase for that, please let me know in the comments because I like to know for my own edification.
Yeah. I'm checking the comments as we're going along here. Yeah, let's see here, 1 second. All right. Next one. Chinese Mafia, here we go. Okay, this is your one also. Take it away.
All right. Xi's last frontier, China's plan to transform its West. Again, this is an article from Financial Times. I noticed ever since Financial Times got taken over by Japanese ownership, they start to pump more and more anti-China articles. So anyway, so they're talking about Xi Jinping's plan for a new year-long investment push on its western regions. They're talking about Xinjiang and Tibet in particular. Will transform an area that covers close to 1/3 of China's landmass, an area that roughly 10 times the size of UK and comparable to much of the Western Europe. So this person actually had some details of what that article is saying. I can't really read it from here, but I can pull it. Maybe I can pull it from my. Let me see if I can find it on my bookmarks. Because the words are really small. Okay.
Yeah, let's see here. This is really interesting because there's always been this narrative how they're trying to isolate Xinjiang, and they're putting so much investment in there. They're connecting it to the rest of the world also, which is a natural reaction also for the U.S. trying to cut China off through different means. It makes sense to develop that region also. So this whole thing, yeah. Go ahead.
I got it. So these are some of the highlights. The article. So taken together, analysts say the plan for a new year-long investment push by Beijing is set to transform an area that covers close to 1/3 of China's landmass. Blah blah blah. The policy is a challenge to the U.S.-led sanction regime imposed to punish China after it detained an estimated million Uyghurs and other. Again, this is an allegation which is not true. In the mid to late 2010s, the UN top human rights official said the crackdown could amount to crime against humanity. The Chinese government has long defended its action in Xinjiang as targeted measure to combat terrorism and extremism. Officials also deny state campaign of re-education and forced labor. The policy is poised to immerse Xinjiang and Tibet not only deeper into China's economy and mainstream culture, but also into the global supply chain. It could also help the People's Liberation Army bolster China's security along its border with India, Russia, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and parts of Central Asia. If China is successful in integrating the region and their people into China's mainstream economy and population, that could over time make it more difficult for Western government to use sanction or boycotts as an effective response to repression. I mean, this is just what they're really saying. They don't care about repression or that. What they're really saying is it will make it harder for United States to sanction China. That's what they're really saying. And the guy who quote tweeted, he's saying The media as an institution is deeply feminine. It henpecks, clutches pearl, but it doesn't commit to the normative position that Xinjiang is to be China's Afghanistan, pre-modern and ungovernable, all be separate. Or just how dare they counter our attempt to deny Uyghur employment. I mean, like, that's what the Western sanction is designed to do. It's designed to deny employment to the Uyghur people, and to make them unemployable. And this is but what the article is saying, that China's effort to integrate it is going to make these Western sanctions increasingly ineffective. So that's the real complaint. It's like the U.S. will lose a weapon to pressurize China.
Yeah, I mean, you could see that. I know we've mentioned this before in previous shows, but one of the most effective ways of reducing extremism that was creeping into Xinjiang before was to increase economic opportunities. According to World Bank studies, according to many studies, the biggest driver of extremism is a lack of opportunities. They brought opportunities to Xinjiang, and it reduced extremism, of course, with other measures as well. Now, when the U.S. removed ETIM from the official terrorist list, basically the Uyghur separatist group, you knew what they were setting up. You knew what they were lining up, and by looking for any factory that hires any Uyghur, and just an image of a Uyghur in a factory being enough to sanction them, has scared many companies away from hiring Uyghurs. It's just not worth the risk. But that's the whole idea. That's the whole goal, is to try to impoverish them. And there's other outlets that have talked about sanctions on different places in the world where they are designed to foment dissent amongst your population so that they rise up against their government. Rudy Giuliani even said it directly with Iran. When Iran was under brutal sanctions, he was actually celebrating the fact that there were people in Iran selling their organs for like $100. He says probably a fortune to them. He says the sanctions are working. They're doing what we want. Like, he was literally celebrating that ordinary Iranians had to sell their organs to make ends meet. So you're absolutely right. That is the whole goal.
Scott Besson also boasted about that, and the specific deal they complain about in the article, in the FT article, is that in March, the Xinjiang government and state-controlled Xinjiang Production Construction Corp announced 92 cooperation agreement with 18 state-owned enterprises in Beijing, spanning sector from energy, critical mineral to computing infrastructure and equipment manufacturing. The deal highlight that along with tourism spending, a big chunk of economic growth is coming from investment by state-owned enterprises and companies from China's more affluent east, akin to a nation receiving foreign direct investment. Over recent months, Chinese state media reported robust medium-term growth figures for both Xinjiang and Tibet. Average annual growth rate in 2025 on a regional GDP basis were 5.5% for Xinjiang and 7% for Tibet, respectively, outperforming the rest of the Chinese economy. This is bad, according to FT. that Xinjiang and Tibet is growing economically. This is somehow bad because it kind of taken a weapon out of the arsenal of the U.S. sanction regime against China.
Absolutely. And that probably ties in really nicely with a comment that you liked online. Here we go.
The more intellectually limited, this original comment was actually in Spanish, but thanks to the auto translation on the X, the more intellectually limited a person is, the more idealized their view of the United States. I mean, how can you argue with that at this point in 2026?
In 2026, yeah. In 2026. Before, you could excuse it a little bit more. There were even more Chinese, 10 years ago that would romanticize, the West. And, part of it is just a natural human nature. The grass is always greener on the other side, or whatever the local Chinese phrases of that is, 那山比之山高, like that was, And the U.S. did a good job of creating an image that it was the land of the free, all this kind of stuff. But that has fallen now, and you have less people in China who are kind of looking at the U.S. in that same kind of romanticized way. But yeah, that comment is definitely true for this day and age. We have one from Kishore Mahbubani that you brought up too, which is a really good video, and makes a brilliant, simple, easy to understand point. And we will listen to the video directly to see what he's saying about that. Here we go.
So after China has gone through the best 30-year period ever under the Chinese Communist Party, the United States is telling the Chinese people, why don't you get rid of the Chinese Communist Party? And the Chinese people are scratching their head and saying, excuse me,
Yeah. I mean, it's so simply true. Look at how far, and with corruption also, like the corruption level in China from when she started to now is a massive difference. I will say that in the earlier stages, when term limits were changed, there were some people in China who were concerned. They were like, this is not so good. Like there were, but you don't hear that as much now. Not because they've been brainwashed, not because, the state media told them to think this way, but because they're seeing the actual progress on the ground. And a lot of people, they ask me that question too. They say, aren't you worried that he'll continue on forever? And I was like, first of all, I don't think he's going to continue on forever. But to be honest, I'm more concerned about what happens with the next guy.
Yes.
The Chinese system is set up in a way where it has fairly good consistency in the vision and the way it moves. But what if the next guy is just, not as good, or, feeds into a more nationalistic approach? I think it was, I'm not sure if it was Kishore or no, it might have been Eric Lee who was talking about if you had kind of, elections in China, or it was something along the lines of this, you would have to create, parties or traditional elections, because they do have types of elections here. But if they had Western liberal style democracy, you would have to create parties that would almost need to capitalize on the differences between people. And all you would need is one party to say, we are going to finally get revenge for what Japan did to us. And we're going to do, the Chinese people would be totally in on it. They'd be like, yes, yes. But luckily, you have level-headed government here who looks at not these kinds of, short-term revenge tying into short-term emotional needs, and actually makes decisions based on long-term goals and everything like that. But I don't know if you want to add more on what Kishore has said there.
I mean, how can you argue with that? how can you argue with that? That's exactly what's happening. That's why, like, the Western narrative on China increasingly no longer works in China, because people look at you like, you crazy? Are you crazy?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll blast through the last few items here. I've got to do some stuff for my RV. We're driving our RV through Xinjiang for 2 months, so I'm getting all the little repairs done. We got a water pump, we got to fix it, everything like that. But let's go. Obviously, since our last show, we had a lot of posts come up on the anniversary of the events in Tiananmen Square. Here we go. Marco Rubio, on June 4th, the world marks 37 years since the Chinese Communist Party ordered its troops to attack thousands of peaceful demonstrators and in and around Tiananmen Square. Those who sacrificed to uphold their unalienable rights of free expression and peaceful assembly will be vindicated someday. Like, this is what they still have to hang on to something from 37 years ago and paint it in a way that didn't actually happen. Like, without, saying that it was completely peaceful, completely ignoring the fact there's tons of evidence showing that police officers, military personnel, they were torched. Some of them were torched. They were killed by protesters. Even the photographer, as you pointed out last time, was beaten up, and he talked about that by the rioters.
He also witnessed the rioters, the mob lynch one of the PLA soldiers. He talked about that in an interview.
Pulled him out of his vehicle.
Pulled him out of the vehicle, and he said that guy probably didn't make it.
Yeah. But I mean, what does that say? Where you have the U.S. actively cracking down on, pro-Palestinian protests, on freedom of speech on campuses, all of this stuff that they're pretending to care about, in a version of China from 37 years ago. Like, this is what they still have to hang on to because they don't really have any other recent examples. And how many people has the U.S. killed since then? Well, first of all, the U.S. police kill every single year, 1,000 people every single year. American police kill. And then never mind talking about the millions of people that have died since even just 9/11 in either U.S.-led wars or U.S. proxy wars. And they're still hanging on to this. They
have to go back 37 years. They have to go back 37 years to fault China for some event. Yeah.
The unfortunate thing about the way that China approaches this is they don't really talk about it. There's information available online. If you search for it specifically, there's documents online, how many students were killed, how many police were killed, all of this stuff. You can find it on Chinese internet, but it's not something that they actively discuss. And because of that, go ahead.
I did my part. People can go to my YouTube channel and find a video where I just talked a few days ago about what happened. From my perspective, because I was 13-year-old back then, living on Chongqing University campus when the protests happened. I give it my take from my perspective for people who are interested in that thing. Yeah.
No, that's. Did you talk about what's her name, Chai Ling? How she was.
Yes.
Yeah.
I had the video. I found that video clip of her interview when she said she's too good to die with the rest of those students, but she said what we need is bloodshed. They don't know what's coming, but I have plans for them. My plan is to force the government to shed blood so they can wake up.
And then when she was asked if she was going to be there, she said, "Oh no, I won't be there for that." It's like, but because China itself doesn't, decides not to talk about it much. The West for a long time has dominated the narrative on that, to the point where you even had, what's her name, Vicky Xu, who went to work for Australian Strategic Policy Institute, a literal organization that's funded by the U.S. State Department and weapons manufacturers of all places. After you had your so-called epiphany about China, and the evils of China, you decide to go to work for a military industrial complex funded think tank. Like that aside, she said one of her moments of awakening was that when she went overseas, it's the first time ever she saw the video of Tank Man. And she says, I can't believe this has been hidden to me for my entire life. But as a result of never hearing about what actually happened, she then decided to adopt wholesale the West's narrative on what happened during that event. So that's something that China kind of undermines themselves with it. It's hard to say what's right or wrong, but it's just something they decide not to talk about. But perhaps, do you want to add something before I bring up the next one?
No, I agree. I think that's one of the things I think China could do is just lighten up on the censorship a little bit. China should be more confident in how its own people talk about things. A lot of people.
Space
so the very common talking points I see on Twitter, actually, Daniel, is Chinese people say, "Oh, I climbed the ladder, I climbed the Great Firewall to come here. I thought I would be able to find some dirt." Then I realized, oh my God, what I see here actually makes me more patriotic than ever. After I have served the internet outside the Great Firewall, see all these people levying attack against China. That makes me a more patriotic citizen than my Chinese government education could ever make me.
Absolutely, yeah. And then we were talking about this is also the Chinese government works tirelessly to erase the memory of June 4th, 1989 from the internet. The CCP censorship on Tiananmen is not just about the past, it's about controlling the present. China remains the world's worst environment for internet freedom. There's no evidence of them trying to erase this nationally and internationally. And one of the best examples of that is TikTok even before it was, bought out, the American operations was bought out. If you search Tiananmen Square on there was all kinds of, Western narrative perspectives on Tiananmen Square. There are, of course, people talking about the alternative, the actual, what actually happened, but largely it was dominated by more of an anti-China stance, which also shouldn't be happening if TikTok was indeed a Chinese government-controlled app, like they're saying. But yeah, no.
Well, the real reason they didn't like TikTok because it talks about Israeli crimes. A lot of youngins are talking about Israeli crimes. That's why they didn't like TikTok. Yeah.
And then
there it is.
Yeah,
there it is. The same Freedom House index of freedom that give China scored 9 out of 100, give Israel 73 out of 100. That's this is enough said.
Yeah. What like what? You have to be an actual
West
cattle
Bank.
to think China is less free than the West Bank. Even when the West Bank they put lower, but still, come on. You had, so I'm going to rush through some of this. So this was translated from Chinese last night. Our program once again discussed June 4th, and I feel that the overseas public opinion circle should have more such calm discussions. That is why the June 4th generation no longer possesses moral appeal. This absolutely cannot be explained by simply phrases like the CCP blocks information. It after a certain period of time, people are going to find out the real facts, even that are backed up by Western media at the time. And you get it's like, don't we have anything new to talk about? We're continually talking about what happened decades and decades ago while we're doing all this stuff. Eventually it's going to lose its oomph. But I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, exactly. For the Zoomers, this happened before they were even born. And for them, what they see is what's currently happening, which is U.S. and Israel are waging, illegal aggression against Iran, and they're committing ethnic cleansing against Palestinians, and Israel is launching an illegal war of aggression against southern Lebanon. And this is what people sees every day. And you're gonna. For them, talking about something happened 37 years ago in China, it does not resonate. And this is why, I notice even on Twitter, the people who are talking about it nowadays are just mostly, U.S. government officials, Western pundits. Most of the youngins don't really care about that.
Right. Let me see here. Okay. This is another one of... I think you brought this one up, right?
Yeah. So again, this is an old FT article. Well, not old, like a few weeks ago, reporting about again. They're kind of trying to bring back that Uyghur genocide narrative back into the mainstream. I think my personal opinion is there is part of their distraction campaign for what Israel is doing. Right. But again, they're hammering the same talking points again and again about how Uyghur is oppressed. But my advice to people, just travel to Xinjiang. I've been there. I've been there last year. I don't see oppression. I talk to people from all walks of life in Xinjiang. They speak their local language, whether adults or children. They all speak the fact that the claim that 90% of the kids were taken away from their parents, sending into some kind of brainwashing boarding school, like what they did to Native Americans in Canada and US, that is bullshit, man. I saw little kids go to school just like any other kids in the morning and then go back home in the evening. I saw that with my own eyes, and I interact them. I hear them speaking Uyghur. I ask them questions in Chinese. They don't seem oppressed to me.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned this on a previous show. I have a friend there who showed me all around the bazaar, the Sunday bazaar in Kashgar, and became longtime friends with him and his family. I sent him a skateboard when I got back to Chongqing, and then I went and saw him a couple of weeks ago. Him and his family, him and his cousin and his uncle were there. and they had to translate for their uncle. They were translating Uyghur between him and us. It's a lot. I'm going my 9th time to Xinjiang. This time self-driving through Xinjiang from one end to another.
I'm jealous. I'm jealous. I mean, like, and the people are super friendly. Like, all I had to do was just learn a couple of Uyghur phrases. I just go around and says Yashimu says, and everybody just like their face just changed, and they smile, and they try to have a conversation with me. I mean, like, yeah, man, it's a great place.
Yeah. Let's see here. Okay. I think, you know what, I'll mention too, I know I mentioned this on the show before, they paused the Xinjiang propaganda for a while because they, I think, you know, when the U.S. was supporting what Israel was doing to Muslims in Gaza and the level of what was going on that you could actually see with your own eyes, it would seem really tacky to still try to pretend that you care about Muslims in China, that things are supposedly happening to that you need to rely on your imagination for. And is also, even if it were true, which it's not, but even if it were true, it's not being funded by the American taxpayer. So you saw a couple of instances where they were trying to revive it, but they did it a little bit too early, where people like, really? Are you serious right now? Because all the people who are talking about Xinjiang, for the most part, are people who support what Israel is doing to Muslims in Gaza. And so people were calling them out like crazy. Now that the Gaza issue, even though it's still ongoing, isn't in the forefront as much, you're going to see them try to creep this back in and try to revive it. That goes hand in hand with this next one, I believe, that you also brought up. Oh, this is a continuation of the previous one. You want to go ahead? Oh, are you muted?
Yeah, we already covered this one.
Okay, let's forget it. Let's continue on. This is interesting. I know you brought this one up, but like this is the same thing that is going on over and over again. They keep saying, "Oh, it's a ghost city," and then all of a sudden you come back a few years later and it's live. They said the same thing about Shenzhen in the 80s. Even like for bigger examples, they said the same thing about Pudong. You know, like when are they? Like how many times do you have to get it wrong before you get embarrassed?
Now they just try to reframe it. Now you know before they say it was a ghost city. Now it says, "Oh, it's becoming an elite enclave."
This is a different angle. Okay, they've changed the angle a little bit.
So back in 2023, which wasn't that long ago, they said Xi's empty dream city shows limit of his power, which says, "Oh, this is a ghost city." And now the latest Economist article says, the Xi Jinping's pet project, Xiong'an, offers perks to growing number of residents, but it's becoming an elite enclave.
I was like, you know, I always said I didn't realize that was what it was referring to, but I always said that why don't they ever come back to these cities that they do these ghost city reports on when it's a thriving place 5 years later? I said that would be really embarrassing for them to have to try to reconcile. But now this is how they're trying to reconcile it, saying, okay, yes, well, you know, it's not a ghost city, but it's something even worse.
Yeah, it's even more. It's a home to government's most privileged workers. Hello, the whole point of Xiong'an was to shift all the government functions away from Beijing to Xiong'an. So of course they're gonna be the government workers that they're supposed to be. It was designed to be a place to hold all these government functions away from Beijing. Anyway, yeah.
Right. And then speaking of also trying to paint the wealth issues and as a problem, this was one that I think you brought up, which is really important too. They're starting to crack down on extreme shows of wealth from influencers, kind of glorifying this life of excess and things like that. Is this one that you sent me?
Yeah. And they would not be promoting Kardashians in China. You know, like shows like Kardashians will get cracked down very quickly, just like because government don't want that kind of thing. You know, Chinese government do not want China's Kim Kardashians. They don't want the youth to have a bad example, role models to look up to. You know, which you can't.
I mean, you know, like this is like, you know, I mean, Western conservatives, they're constantly complaining about, you know, moral decay and extreme wealth worship and the extreme kind of toxic, influence of influencers. But then when China actually regulates these exact so-called social harms, then the West condemns it as this kind of draconian censorship. It's like they're constantly solving all of the issues that people in the West are complaining about or that are concerned about, and then attacking China when they do that, when they actually do it. I think this was Oh, yeah. I like this one. I did yeah. I'm not sure if you shared this, but I love this too. China has won. I've decided to never again comment on Chinese propaganda posts to call them out or correct them. It doesn't work. And especially on Instagram, there's no way to turn off notifications for these countless replies of trolls and bots. China spends millions to spread pro-China and anti-China or anti-US propaganda through bots. Meanwhile, those who fall for it don't even realize that Instagram and X are both blocked in China. Normal Chinese citizens can't and don't use it. I mean, there's so much to unpack there. It's like, no, there's no evidence of China spending all of this money on this kind of a campaign. In fact, even there's a guy, Hot Pot King Nathan Rich, I think his name is, in China. He was complaining about the censorship he was complaining about in China was when he put videos that were overly critical of the U.S. on Bilibili, they would get censored, saying it was inflammatory towards another country. Like, so it's like the opposite of what is happening. But you know, the U.S. is on record spending billions, not millions, billions of dollars on anti-China propaganda. They literally approved all kinds of, and then of course they have their regular, NED, Radio Free Asia, all this stuff. And they still can't compete against China, which is terrible at propaganda. They're terrible at telling their own story. So no, you're not losing because there's some sort of a sophisticated, highly funded campaign. You're losing because the narrative is not on your side. You continue on a bit. I've got somebody calling me to fix my RV. You talk on this topic and interact a little bit. I'm going to tell him. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, that's just the fact that he pretends that every X user or Instagram user must be a Chinese government approved bot or agent. I mean, he obviously never heard of VPN, and a lot of Chinese people do use VPN. Now, the ironic thing is, a lot of Chinese users who, use VPN to access X, they actually didn't come here for political commentary. I know for a fact many of them use it to access porn, which is blocked inside China. But yet those people would say, I came to X for porn, yet I'm getting so outraged by all this anti-China comment. Now it has radicalized me, making me into a political shitposter when my original intention was to come to X to browse porn. So people just don't understand. Like these people obviously have never interacted with real Chinese people. At least the real average Chinese people outside, like maybe the echo chamber of a few Chinese dissident who the total Western lines and stuff like that. Right.
All right. So the guy who's repairing the water pump on my RV is here. I told him where it is. He's just gonna do it. So I've got a few more minutes here. Empty city, wealth, influence, China won. Oh, this is one that you brought up, Zhang Wei. Beautiful video. And we can just watch the video directly. It's a 3-minute video. And then after this, we've got one more short thing, and then we are done. So here we go. Let's start with the 3-minute video.
演讲中提到，就是加州要建高铁，到现在1公里都没有建起来。我80年代美国去了很多次，那个时候听说美国要搞高铁，我们连高速公路还没有呢。我们说，哟，这了不起啊！他最后是什么都没搞成。很多原因，用中国道路来讲的话，它没有党的领导，对，没有代表人民整体利益的一种政治架构，对，大家都讲自己利益，合不起来的。对，张老师，法国进入德国，这个标志就不一样了。然后呢，德国是不限里程的，法国是非常严格的限里程的，铁路也是的。我们最近刚刚去塞尔维亚，中国帮他们建到匈牙利这个铁路，现在塞尔维亚这段已经建完了。它的标准呢很有意思，它是200公里，但是保留了以后晋升到高铁就250公里的这个可能性。但匈牙利那段160公里不可能变，就160公里。 那边它是严格的欧盟标准。
您刚才也说，其实铁总并不挣钱，想要靠票价来值回这个建设成本，那可能也是很漫长的一个话题。但事实上，它拉动的是人流、客流、信息流所有的这个流动，这个的流动对整个社会经济带来的推动作用，那个是无法限量的。所以我觉得，就我们算的一直是一笔总账。就您刚才说的，回到我们党的领导，它是整体利益党，我们算的是。
你看总书记的经济思想啊，就是它里边有一点，供给也会创造需求。很多东西建设不要想那么多。
对。
你这个高速公路在了，血脉都打通了，很多需求，新的需求就创造出来了。
对中国，比如说在农村啊修了很多公路嘛，很好的基础设施，他觉得这个经济上不合算。但是反过来说，修了这些交通之后，提升了这地方的经济价值，是吧？交通是给这个地方。
另外还有啊，就是进行这种公共的大基建的建设，它需要长时间的投入，
对，
长期的等待。
对，
您刚刚一开始说了规划，
对，
那我们知道还要时间，对不对？还要巨量的资金，
对。
但这个也都是我们制度的优越性。
是
这个时间你放在西方，或者说你这个巨量的投资放在西方，如果由私人企业来承担，
对，
他愿不愿意投，这就是困难了。
因为它这种交通基础设施建设一般都是长周期的，所以说这个在这里边它就面临很大风险嘛，很多方面它就推不起来。公共性是说人人有份，是吧？大家都应该享受这种便捷的、快速的、好的这种服务。但是美国一说到这个公共性的时候，它实际上只是一种兜底，它在很多领域所谓的公共提供的，它都是质量比较差的，在教育啊，在医疗啊，是吧？可能在交通一定程度上也是这样。我前面说了那个对战里边，体会一个就社会主义很值钱，
看出社会主义制度的优越性。您刚刚说了社会主义4个字很值钱啊。
对。
另外还说到了我们的这个立体交通网络，它非常强调的是它的为人民服务、人民性，就一定要让老百姓感觉到确实实实在在的有收获。一听说自己家乡通高铁都很开心，以前都觉得好像高铁通不通没有什么感觉，现在大家都有了，我的县也有了啊，那个感觉是完全不一
样。Yeah, I mean it's amazing that the transformation you have. In the 80s, you had the promise of high-speed rail and all this stuff in California, and during that time there was no major, even just a highway network in China. And now,
I'll tell you a story. I'll tell you a story
go
about
ahead.
1980s because my dad was already studying United States, but we didn't have phone in our house. So to make an international call, we have to travel to Chongqing downtown city center to make international call at the China post office, and then so it takes a whole day. My mom has to take a day off work and to take me over there, and then when we go back home, time to go back home, it's evening rush hour. And when the bus came, there was a crowd just rushed the bus. There was no line. The crowd just rushed the bus. And like those 20-year-old young men, they will crawl through the window. Me and my mom look at it and it's like, oh my God, there's no way we're going to make it to the bus. So we have to walk several blocks to the next station, right? Like that was 1980s. I mean, the level of improvement is just unbelievable.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it goes back to the same thing that Kishore Mahbubani said too. Like after all of this transformation, like you're asking on one hand to, overthrow the current leader or overthrow the government entirely. It's like, what are you smoking? Like, what are you smoking? We have this one I didn't share in the group, but it's quite interesting to finish off on this one. I'll play the video here. Take a look at this.
Text will always be king.
Most recently, U.S. Forces Korea Commander General Xavier Bronson made a striking remark in a public interview, stating that South Korea is, quote-unquote, a dagger in the heart of Asia aimed at China. This comment stands in a stark contradiction to the spirit of a constructive China-U.S. relationship of strategic stability, which our two presidents agreed to build during President Trump's most recent visit to China, which you also just referred to in your speech. President Trump, in particular, has also repeatedly emphasized his desire to forge the best possible relationship with China. My question is simple. Does General Bronson's statement represent the official position of the Trump administration and its characterization of South Korea's role as a dagger aimed at China authorized or endorsed by the Pentagon? Thank you.
What I said was trying to describe the operating environment, because what's incredibly important in being strong and quiet is about being able to describe the environment wherein we're working. If you remember, the Prussian philosopher, military philosopher Clemens talked about Korea being a dagger pointed at Japan. The difference is we have to change our perspective, which is why the East Up map is important. By changing our perspective, we take into account how others might see us in the region. We've got to be strong. We've got to have the right capabilities within the Republic of Korea, but we have to understand that those things still exist, and you have to combat those things every day. What I was trying to do in a place of learning was talk to War College students about how we have to change our perspective and think about where we are. Then I can advise not only my service secretary, but then my secretary, my boss in the Department of War, on what things we might do. The only way there will be philosophers in the future wearing uniforms like myself will be that we enter into the field of ideas. And we challenge ideas. And I'm okay with the challenge of the ideas, but we have to remember that context will always be king. And we have to take remarks contextually. And I would encourage that you listen to the entire podcast, as well as the speech that I gave to the War College students, which was pretty good.
The U.S. has this remarkable ability to speak with such a level of confidence that sometimes you have yourself asking yourself, "Am I the stupid one?" But wait, no. Then it's like you didn't actually answer the question, and you said just listen to the entire podcast. No, how about you just answer the two questions that has been presented to you? He's not willing to listen to it, and that's why I think there's a deep understanding that they can build relations with the U.S. They can try to improve the friendship between the two sides, but you always have to be careful here, because at the end of the day, you never know when they're gonna flip on you. You know that if they still have a way to crush you, they will. I don't know what your reaction is to seeing that answer to those questions.
I mean, he says it's important to understand context. I mean, it's not that. It's pretty easy to understand the context, because from the perspective of U.S. military, this is how they always talk. Because General Douglas MacArthur, when he was stationed in Japan, he had said during the Korean War, he had said Taiwan was unsinkable aircraft carrier off the coast of China. So from the perspective of U.S. military, every piece of land adjacent to mainland China is an unsinkable aircraft carrier or dagger pointing at the heart of China. This is how when you have a nail, when you have a hammer, everything is a nail. For U.S. military, this is how they always view the relationship with China. That China is a problem that needs to be solved, that needs to be contained. Yeah.
And this is, they're always asking, why is China spending so much on defense? Why are they building up their defensive capabilities? And the answer is, well, we have these risks that are surrounding us. And they say, oh, no, you're crazy. That doesn't make any sense. Of course not. But then they're actually saying these things out loud. They're actually confirming all of China's concerns when they're, revealing on a podcast. I love this episode. There's this one thing. There's these there's a guy being interrogated by the police in this room in the U.S. And he says, "Oh, you tell us what happened. Why did you do this?" and stuff like that. He's like, "I'm not saying anything." And then all of a sudden they bring in like two microphones and some lighting and some cameras, and they pretend it's a podcast. And then all of a sudden the criminal opens up. He's like, "Oh, so I was, And that's essentially what's happening. You get these U.S. government guys on a podcast, and then they'll admit everything out loud. Yeah, no, that's exactly what's happening. We don't have any more content. So we're going to wrap it up here. I don't know if there's anything else you want to finish on, or we just...
we already gone on more than 2 hours, so I think it's good.
We're good. All right, so once again, I'm not 100% sure we could do one next week, but for sure, 2 weeks, I'm taking my equipment with me on the road. I'll do we'll do these episodes I'll be going through Inner Mongolia, through Xinjiang. Maybe I'll set it up outside of my RV and you can see a little bit of the background. Or maybe I'll even get some clips ready of our trip that I can share on our live stream also. On the road or anything interesting I've seen. Yeah. We can introduce it to the show, make it a little bit more fun. But yeah, no, thanks everybody for joining. Thank you, Carl, once again, and we will see you all next time. Peace.
Bye bye.